will call the meeting to order. And I don't know, do we want to take attendance? We can do that. Rich?
Here.
Mike?
Here.
Martha?
I'm here, and when I bend down, it's because Rosie's on the floor, and I got to keep her away from the electric heater, so, excuse me.
That's okay.
The smell of burning dog hair isn't really that great.
No. So, and I'm here too, so we have 4 out of 5, and we can get going. Michelle tells me we have no comments from the public. And I understand that Jason is in interviews and will join us when he can. So I think we're going to move right along to the TC3 update. Take it away, Bill.
All right, Arinthi, do you want to just have any open comments? And then I'll get the screen up here.
No.
Okay.
No, just kidding. Thank you guys for allowing us this opportunity to be in front of you today and share our thoughts.
Oh, no, I appreciate giving us as much advance warning as you can.
Okay. Well, and again, I also thank you very much for your time. The objective of this meeting truly is to be informative, is to share with you what's happened this last year, where we are this year, what we're seeing going into next year. We are expanding our planning practices and processes. We want to be more inclusive with the 2 counties much earlier in the planning process, rather than at the end when we're saying, this is what we have, this is why we have it, and are you guys okay with it? So to do that, we really have to share some of our challenges that we're trying to resolve as we're going through the planning process. So you do see a lot of question marks there. We've got ideas and we'll always make the recommendations, but we want to make sure that you understand and can appreciate that these are not, we haven't made any determinations yet because we're in the process. So these are the things that we're thinking about. And what we really want you guys to do is to understand our options and to weigh in on what you think you'd like us to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. So this is a very transitional period for community colleges. And there's still a lot of unanswered questions, but the intent of this is to spend 15 minutes to go through this and then take questions for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Does that seem reasonable?
Sounds good.
Great.
So you don't want questions during your presentation. You want us to save them for the end?
No, you don't have to. It's only 6 charts, so you can stop.
Okay.
Time. If you ask a question that we'll cover, I'll tell you we'll cover it in a few minutes. All right, TC3, where are we right now? All right, so 2019-20, you look at the fund balance, we actually ended up with 1 million in excess fund balance. That was predominantly because of all the cost saving programs that we put in place. Some of them, as in putting everybody on furloughs in the summertime, we generated 400,000 worth of savings there. We had numerous positions that people left that we did not backfill. And then there's a lot of natural savings that take place when you're working remotely and when you're teaching remotely. So all those things came up to about $1 million savings. We did receive some funds from COVID. Those were offset by the losses from the state, but we still netted out $1 million in the last 4 to 5 CFO reports. When we meet with the board, I have predicted that we'd end up about $1 million left over. That $1 million went into the budget for 2021 to help cover some of the gap losses of both the state's losses, but also the enrollment losses that we predicted in the fall semester.
Excuse me, Bill. So you're talking about, this is Martha Robertson. So your fund balance at the end of 2020, you ended up being able to add $1 million. Your fund balance was $1 million more than at the end of 19.
At the end of 1920. So our year ends August 31st. So August 31st of 2020, we put $1 million back in.
Well, Bill, did we use less from our fund balance and returned? So we didn't have to draw down as much out of the fund balance? Is that
Yeah,
what
we
you're
drew,
getting?
we drew down as part of the 1920 plan, we drew down $500,000. $1 million is going back now. So net, we ended up
500,000.
$500,000 ahead if you looked at the beginning balance in September 1st of 2019.
Your fiscal year is September 1st to August 31st.
Yes.
Correct.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, and for 2021, expenses in the first 5 months were $2.5 million favorable to budget. And however, our revenues for the first 5 months is $2.8 million unfavorable to budget. So when we look at the spring semester, especially spring, we did not plan on having any losses. Don't forget, we put all this together back in April of last year. So the pandemic had only just hit. And so we assumed that we would be back to our regular enrollments and maybe even a little bit higher, just a little bit, which would leave us about 750,000. If nothing were to change, we would be pulling the remainder of that out. But the reality is New York State is going to be returning monies to us because the Democrats, okay, so now we've already.
Bill, excuse me. Yeah, could you go back that slide again?
Sure.
So you actually did, you said right now we have 1.7 million, but then you said in the fund balance, but then you said we took $1 million out.
Mhm.
So right now you have 0.7 million, not 1.7. Okay.
And then with the state, if the states, as the state starts to return funds, the first portion of that would offset what I would expect to be the unfavorable ending of the year. And then the remaining above that would go back into the fund balance and bring us back up against the 700,000 again.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think rather than worrying about the specific numbers, it's more important to capture that we'll actually be in a pretty good shape at the end of this year if the state comes through based on the $6 billion of unrestricted funds. We've heard might get all of it back if the higher amounts come forward. But the good news is that we'll end up building the fund balance back up again for this year. As far as the CARES Act, we've spent it all. And there was the requirement there was that we spend it on incremental COVID related expenses. So this did not cover any of the existing expenses that the college typically would endure in a COVID free environment. However, CRSA, which was approved in December, there's more money coming to the college for that from there. 3.3 million to the institution. However, we're not 100% sure, but our interpretation of everything that we've read and heard is that we can use that to offset revenues. So as you saw, we've taken a pretty large hit on our spring semester. And there may be some opportunity to use that against last fall semester, but we're waiting for guidance on what the formulas are, what that really means, when we can take it. And we have 2 years to take that, to draw that money down. So that's another good news idea or good news piece of information. Reality, and this is where the business part comes into play, the reality is that we really need to assess our market because we've had some pretty large hits and changes that have taken place as a result of COVID. We don't really know how long it's going to take to recover and what will look like a year to 2 years from now. And so while you're hearing some great news about that we'll end up being able to build up that fund balance, we need that fund balance to get us through this transitional period in the next 2 to 3 years. So with COVID, the college's net tuition revenue has been significantly impacted. We've lost 2/3 of the full-time degree-seeking residential students. So think about that. That in this 1 year, we went from roughly 450 students in the dorms down to 150 students in the dorms. And so that not only affects the impact on the foundation, it also hugely impacts us because all those students, almost all of those students, we would have collected county chargeback fees in addition to the tuition that we received. We lost 25% of all of our FTEs. And the question becomes, how long will this take for things to come back to normal? And if you read up on it, there are different things or different conversations, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer than everything will be back to normal in the fall semester. Part-time students, though, they are growing. So we've seen 11% increase in the spring over last spring in part-time students. And there seems to be more focus around existing people working, wanting to improve their position, or somebody who is looking to attend part-time to see if there's an opportunity to do something and go back to school. And don't forget, one of the reasons why we've lost so many students is because we have not had full face-to-face classes again, right? And at any point in time, we can jump back and forth between face-to-face and remote, but some of our students just want the comfort of knowing that they can take a class, sit there, listen to the instructor, take their notes, and not have to do this via technology. Yet we have a group of students building that have done this, feel very comfortable, love the fact that they can go back and rewatch the video, can if there's a complication and they can't attend a class, they can watch that class at night. So we have found that the increased modalities that are offered are providing us with some new market opportunities. But we can't forget that there's a large base of students that really just want face-to-face classes also. And our concurrent students continue to grow. We are the largest distributor of concurrent classes in New York State.
How does that play out in your revenues?
All right, so these are high school students that are taking classes. For the two sponsoring counties, the only revenue that we receive for the effort of designing the class and supporting the teachers and training the teachers and observing the teachers, teaching the class, is the next year it goes towards the FTEs that the state pays their proportion against. So we don't receive any funds in the current year for the concurrent students and the sponsors, but we do see them the following year. For those counties outside of the two sponsors, we actually collect the county chargeback on those students also. And that is a large piece for us. And it is in the current period, in the current year that we're providing the services.
Bill, do you see an admissions component with the concurrent students?
We do.
What do you mean, Henry?
What I mean is, do the concurrent students take classes and do they enroll at TC3 when they graduate?
Yes, they do. The question becomes whether or not, because we've got more online classes, whether that will actually increase, right? Because many of them that came from outside of the two sponsoring counties or outside the donut may have come here for and used the dorms. And now there's another vehicle by which they can take those classes. So we've seen an increase year over year. We saw a little bit of a dip this spring, but that is because of the high schools, all of the teachers being overwhelmed with all the classes they had to teach online without their knowledge on how to do this. And so some of them just backed away and said, it's just too much for us in the spring. But we think that that market will bounce right back.
What's the donut?
The donuts, okay. So we've got the two sponsoring counties, and then all the other counties that touch your two counties, Cortland, and we call that the donut.
Okay.
They're often within distance, they could still drive here, although many of them will reside here. But it's a pretty big market for us. And then of course, downstate, when we're talking about downstate, Westchester, New York City, Long Island is a very large market for us as it related to the dorms. But we saw a pretty large decline there during COVID. So we're also seeing that the market needs are shifting more from a traditional full-time degree seeker to a part-time working adult. We're seeing we need to assess the opportunities to invest in more programs that will serve the career seekers. We need to assess opportunities to revive the residential student program. And we're assessing our marketing enrollment processes to ensure that as soon as we get a lead, that lead moves smoothly through all of our different staff, and that all the right resources are there to convince them that we're the right place, and also to be much more aggressive in our marketing of all of our successes and all of our students into these markets, so that they're considering us as the first person to call or the first college to call for attending. We've got, during open enrollment, we attract students with a wide array of student support services. So just to be really clear, most colleges, there's some type of an enrollment process, and there's an evaluation on your grades, on your background, to determine whether or not you can make it. There is none of that for a community college. So as long as you've got a high school equivalency, you're allowed to attend. And so what we find is that other schools that may not have accepted that student for whatever the reason, they're viewing that student as they're not prepared for college and for their curriculum and their environment. And so students often come to our college, in which case we usually have to provide a lot of other services, whether it be through tutoring, get them up to speed, whether it be through some type of professional service, health, mental health, all those different things that help them adjust to college and to integrate college into their life. So we spend a lot of time and effort in that, and staff and organizations, and there's no incremental dollars for that. So the cost for us to serve some of these students is a lot higher than it is for another college. And we just need to take that into consideration as we're thinking through budgets. State and county funding models are antiquated. They no longer serve the groups that we're serving. When this all started, it started with 33, 33, 33. And then it changed to 40% tuition, and the state took just a little bit over a quarter. And you guys continue to take on what should be a third. And I say you, it's both the sponsoring counties and the county chargebacks. But the reality is that it doesn't really work. The state's proportion doesn't really serve the college like it used to, especially when you've got so many long-term expenses and trying to serve this market, with all the incremental services beyond just the teaching in the class. And because it all is done at an FTE level, a full-time equivalency, where you take all the credits and you divide the credits by 60, and that becomes the definition of a full-time equivalency, the reality is you could end up with, 3 to 4 students per FTE, and each of them require all these services. Each of them require the enrollment process. Each of them requires sitting somebody down and scheduling them and figuring out what their career looks like, their academic career. And so it doesn't make sense to do this and reward for an FTE. It really should be at a student level, since all these services are at a student level, whether they're part-time or full-time. They take just as many services. And that's antiquated. It doesn't work anymore. When we look at the market changes, we need to start thinking about, is the college structure set up in a way that will best serve this group of students as we continue to look at where the market is going? So we look at the promotion of the colleges and offerings. In the past, community colleges, just in general, it was more getting the information out there, what we did and who we were. We didn't really market. When you look at the percent of a budget that was spent towards advertising, it's very, very low. Maybe $100,000 in total is what's spent in advertising. When you look at, if you're really trying to promote yourself, I've seen in the private sector, it's as much as 3% of the revenue. You spend on advertising to get the message out there, to attract the students that align with the services and the offerings that you've got in place. When you look at the academic majors and the programs and the length and the delivery of this, the question is, and this is a long-term change. It's not like you can just let go of a program. It takes generally 2 to 3 years to transition out of a particular program. But do we have all the right programs? Should we be investing in new programs? Should we be looking at certain programs and modifying them and actually investing additional monies into the classrooms that they're teaching in, updating equipment so that we definitely are seen as somebody who's cutting edge, as opposed to students coming in right now into our science labs. They have better equipment in their high schools than we have here in the college. When you look at the enrollment management and the conversion and the retention, should we be investing in systems that help us prioritize and to reach out and to communicate with students that are interested in the college? We don't even have a CRM right now, a customer relationships software, which is usually required to keep track of all these so that you don't let anybody fall through the cracks. Student support services, counseling, advising, all those types of things. Do we have everything that we need in place? And or do we need slightly different twist on some of these students? If all of a sudden we're moving from what would be a degree seeker to older adults that are looking to improve their career, well, there may be a very different set of advisors that is sitting there talking to them than a 18-year-old student who's coming in directly from high school. Further streamlining our operations, okay, with software and upgrades. We've done a lot of that in this last year and a half, but there's still a lot that could be done. And again, you can't do all of this simultaneously and get it all done in one particular year. But those are all the questions and obviously the areas that we're going to focus on as we're starting to pull together the information and we continue to share it with you. But probably one of the biggest opportunities that we have is community engagement. We have, we spend time with each of the organizations and with people outside the organization as we have things to talk about, but we've never really asked for the type of engagement that we're looking for. And I think the greatest opportunity that we have, through this group is for you to fully understand what we can and can't do. And if we can't do something, is to help guide us as to what you want us to do, and then use all your resources to get that message back out to Tompkins community, to make sure that all the resources that you have access to are promoting the college and that the college is part of your overall solution to getting people back to work, to ensuring that people have an opportunity directly from high school back into the college. And hopefully we can keep some of that, some of those brains so that we don't have the brain drain that does take place every once in a while. And then working much more closely with the county economic and workforce development organizations, because we agree that that's where we want to put some of our resources. But we have to agree to do that, and it requires additional funding to do that, unless we are wishing to cut funding from somewhere else in the college, and that's always the hardest part. So what do we recommend for 21-22? We're going to change the planning process, the budget planning process. Typically what we have done is, we've got a strategic plan. We spent a couple of years putting that together and implementing it. It's coming along really nicely, and there's lots of updates for that to show how we've come along, and even just the last year. And from a budget standpoint, last year we definitely, by department, we made sure that any request for monies, and when I say any request, I mean all the monies, okay? That we started zero line baseline, and that's what we did last year, is we have to explain how it helps us to achieve the strategic plan. And so that last year, we actually did that for every single department. But this year, given all the changes that have taken place, we recognize that there's a piece missing. And the piece that's missing is we need to connect the departmental budgets and their functions in with the business markets that we see growing and that we want to invest in, and or move some of those funds from the business markets that we're not seeing the same interest, and realign those resources to where the opportunities are. So we're going to create business market plans this year prior to the budgets. And that's where your part comes into play, is we start to break those markets out. We tell you what the opportunities are, how we're going to get there, how we're going to try to grow it over the next 3 years. And so we wish to keep this simple for this year. We're talking about 2 to 6 pages for each market. And once that's been determined, then what we'll do is build the budgets, departmental budgets off of that, and we'll also ask them how they're helping to grow each of the and or serve each of those markets. We'll include metrics for assessing and reporting. And the other differences will also include some form of a financial look forward. So I don't want to say projection, I don't want to say forecast. It's more of, okay, if this is what we do for 21, 22, what do we think? How do we think this will feed into the general changes that are taking place between 22 and 24? So it becomes, it's not a full 3-year plan, but it does first pass, give us some idea and discussion around how we think this will help transition the college approach, because as opposed to everybody looking, each person now is going to also look at and maybe even identify. There could be a second set of plans, as an example, that might be based on their interaction with us. So resident students versus full-time commuters versus part-time commuters. They have very different needs. And students would exist in both those two groups in one way or another. That's why the simplicity is keep it simple. But the fact that we've gone through and thought through, all right, so how do we reach these students? Where are they coming from? How are we going to attract them? What are their real needs? Do we have those? Are we able to deliver those particular needs? If not, how many students do we have today? How many do we think we can get tomorrow? How many funds do we want to put in advertising, or how many funds do we want to beef up a department for? Because we recognize that we're seeing older students come. Well, it's if they're older and they're trying to integrate the college in, we may not have enough services for that first semester to see them succeed to the second semester, where we've overcome all their anxieties of trying to figure out childcare and working and a class that's online all at the same time. It's just too much for them and they drop out. So we may need additional resources or a new class for them to get them comfortable. So as you go through each of these different types of markets, you then build the business around those markets and then monitor it and see whether or not we're doing it the right way or not.
As part of this process, are you going, yeah, that's very helpful. As a part of this process, are you going to survey current students?
Yes, but it's not, I don't think it's a formal survey. We tend to know what students need. The challenge has been that, so traditionally, you're talking about minor changes from year to year, right? So we know what those changes, what students want and need. And so we try to tweak our model to do better in areas that we know students have asked for. This year, it's such a big change across the board that doesn't really work as well. And that's the reason for sort of building this bottoms up through the market, the business market plans.
Martha, also with
Thank
the
you.
student trustee and the student government president, they technically do a lot of the surveying and soliciting student feedback, as well as the SUNY student satisfaction survey. We're able to get information from there because we can add our own questions to that. So there'll be some data to support where we're going. And like Bill talked about, really it's kind of this onboarding marketing piece, all of them. How do you onboard them so that they come into this process and they're all at basically the same pace, if you will, in terms of their success and what they want. I have 800,000 sitting in cash. So yes, we have to come back and figure out how to negotiate that. But right now, I don't think we have a definitive answer. Bill, am I on track with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're early enough in this process. That's the intent of bringing you in at this point. We don't have those answers because if we did, we'd be done. And then we'd be back to the way we did it last year, which is making recommendations and telling you that it's a big challenge. The other opportunity that exists, if you recall last year, we were in line for a pretty large grant, a workforce development grant that would have, when we designed it and submitted the grant and we made it through 2/3 of the process, it would have replaced all of the technology in the science labs and the furniture, and actually renovated the rooms to be in line with what the teachers were looking for. So Mike, in that particular case, that problem would have been solved by that unique grant that we put in for and almost made through all the way before COVID hit.
And Deb, we have, that is still on the table as far as we know with SUNY. They've not explicitly said that grant is not happening.
Yes, and then last week there was a little glimmer of hope because they made an announcement of other organizations that were kind of stuck in that pandemic pause. So I can find the announcement of the other Workforce Development Initiative money that was released. So it gives us hope that they didn't just wipe that money out. Like we did hear specifically from other state funds that we either were receiving or had gotten grants from. They just basically flat out said, forget it, that money is gone. This Workforce Development Initiative money, they kept back. So we're still keeping our fingers crossed that that'll come through.
And I think the other, I'm
Sorry.
sorry, the other thing I think there's an opportunity for, which I know Orinthia, when I first arrived, Orinthia was really excited about and wanted to see us expand, is that there is money out there for grants. And so, you know, you need to set up a structure that can respond quickly to identify and respond quickly and build it and then execute it. And the college, you know, 2 years ago wasn't in that position. The management team that she's put in place works very, very quickly together, and we can respond to some of these. We probably need some additional help, you know, from a grant writer standpoint, because there is a benefit if you hire somebody that knows how to write grants for specific organizations. There's no question there's some value to that. But the point being is, as we go through this process, that's where those types of things, you know, come out, and they're easily measurable. You know, if you hired a grant writer, and I'm just throwing that out, you know what the salary is, you know what the benefits are. The question is, did you get that much more plus in grants for the next year? It's easily tracked as to whether it's working or not. So those are the kind of things that as we go through each of these functions and we're looking for different ways to generate revenue, different ways to move the expenses around in alignment with where we think those revenues need to be. But something as simple as saying, this is the area that we're going to focus on. We may result in focusing less on degree seekers and more on workforce development. And if we do that, there may be a time that it takes to develop one market at the expense of the other. And are you okay with that as we outline those plans? And that's where the feedback comes into play. If you felt as though that was definitely the wrong direction, you have an opportunity before we get too far down that pathway to provide some input or recommendations. And that's the intent, is to involve you in some of these questions. We don't have the answers yet. That's what we're working through. But we should have everything done by the end of May.
Martha, did you have something else?
Yeah, my guess is that sort of shovel-ready programs, projects, you know, applications will be well received by federal and state grantors. The rescue plan that's going to be signed this week has a lot of dollars in it, and I think people want to get those dollars moving. So, you know, if you've got a workforce development initiative that was ready 2 years ago, might be a great time to polish it up, make sure it's current. And I also would ask if you are in touch with Diane Miller at with Cornell's Government Affairs Office in Washington. she might be a great resource. They've been extremely, Charlie Krasansky in Albany and Diane in Washington have been extremely helpful to us in a million ways. And I think my guess is she wouldn't see TC3 getting a grant as competing with Cornell, especially if it's a workforce grant. It's a different kind of animal. So Deb says, we talk regularly with Diane and Charlie. Good, because she would probably be the right place to go for the latest information. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to draw this one to a close because we're 48 minutes into our 2-hour meeting. Yeah.
Just one quick comment I wanted to mention at the last TC3 board meeting. The Cortland liaison, Kevin Fitch, spoke about after a presentation that Bill and Brinthia had given last month to that legislature. And he made the comment about how much they appreciated it, and that I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but he said after that presentation, the college now has the buy-in from their legislature. And I couldn't help thinking to myself, where you been? But I was awfully glad to hear that. And that was very encouraging considering the difficulties we've had over the last few years with Portland.
We've been spending time. We've been spending a lot of time with them, both in smaller groups, medium-sized groups, and quite frankly, the larger group. And I think part of it was they didn't have as much of an understanding. They had heard what we've said. We've said things in the past, but they didn't understand what they were listening to. And so by us more frequently focusing on specific areas and saying it more in layman's terms, quite frankly, they kind of got it. And this last time around, they understood that we were saying that if we don't make these changes, then we'll need to start cutting programs of some type. We'll need to take drastic action unless they understand, and they're owned by us. And that was a big thing. You own us. Think of us as a subsidiary of the county. If you don't help us make these decisions, then whatever happens is going to fall on your door way too late, and you're going to be surprised at what you got or what you don't have, and yet you're still paying into it. So you need to be part of this process and not just say, no, we don't like it or we don't want this. And they kind of came around. So it was good.
Thanks.
I think, Bill, that even if you have buy-in and you plan, you are going to have to cut some programs. I do not see how in this environment you can continue to try to be all things to all people. I'm watching what's going on at IC, and I'm reading reactions from colleges around the country and organizations that, provide for the needs of those colleges. And what I'm reading is that everyone's having to do this to some extent. I find it refreshing that you're willing to start from the bottom up and do your market research and figure out what is going to be a moneymaker for you and what isn't, and start focusing on those areas that will keep the college attractive to students and bringing in healthy revenues. I mean, to me, that's where I would be looking. And I applaud your focus on career seekers versus degree seekers. I certainly understand the usefulness of community colleges to degree seekers, but I also think, especially now, and especially in New York, as we try to meet the requirements of the CLCPA and react to climate change, we really do need to focus on these technical green careers. I think that you would have an extremely willing and energetic partner in Natalie Bernowski. I think there are ways that TC3 can work with our Workforce Development Board, with IAED, with BOCES, and with the state university to make TC3, a destination college for people who are interested in those technical careers. And I think that that would be an extremely profitable focus for TC3 and would keep the college healthy. Because I too am worried about what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yep. So the next meeting we get to, we'll talk a little bit more. And I don't know who comes to these meetings, and that's the it doesn't have to be decided right here. But as I talk to Jason, it's who from your group, along with who from Cortland, comes and actually has these conversations with us, because sometimes when we think about profit, and understand I have some historical knowledge on that. What you need to do for the community doesn't always mean profit. And so there's got to be a balance. As a great example, our nursing program is unprofitable. There's a lot of investment that goes into that, and that is not a profit making program whatsoever. So you can't always use profit to dictate which programs, but there has to be a balance. And there are other ways to look at this. So it's not for today's conversation, but there's also ramp up costs. You start creating new programs, you need new equipment, you need to, so there's ramp ups before you get to see that profit. And it may be 3 years out before the break even hits. Which
Yeah,
means
but
now
if you're
But-
looking at an ambitious capital plan, for example,
Oh, absolutely.
you
Yeah.
need to figure out what direction your course load's going to be moving in to figure out where you need to be putting that capital
Absolutely.
first.
Yep, you're 100% right.
So,
Nope.
okay, Martha, I'm going to let you have the last word, and then we're going to have to move on.
Got it. And absolutely. I am glad you mentioned nursing, Bill. That was on my list. So, you know, even if Guthrie is supporting your program, you could probably approach QCOMED too. They're in real dire straits for staff.
We do plan to go back to them, Martha.
I'm sorry?
So we do plan to go back to them. We did approach them originally, and at that time, only one signed on, but there's a need regardless.
Yeah. So even after the pandemic, do you have a one pager or a talking piece about the headcount issue? We're meeting with our delegation in the next couple of weeks, and we would really like to have your description of the issues. So please send us that. Send that to us, and so we can, because the community college funding is top of the list of the asks that we have. We want to make sure we have the right talking points.
I do want to say that SUNY gave us an advocacy sheet to use. And transparency's sake, we're going to create a supplemental one because it was so very broad-based and it really did not address TC3 and our communities that we're serving here. And so there was no real ask in it, but we will put that together, our supplemental document, and send both of them to you.
Great, thanks a million.
So I have a really dumb question that relates to this. This open enrollment model that you operate on, is that mandated for community colleges by the state?
It is. All
I believe
community
so.
colleges are open access institutions. So
Okay.
there's no ACT, SAT to get in. As long as you have your high school diploma, GED, or some other kind of equivalency, yes.
I think that makes your per student versus per FTE argument that much stronger, because you don't have a choice about taking these students that
Correct.
require special, yeah.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. So can you get through your final slide in like 2 seconds?
Yeah. So just to give you some perspective, the sponsored counties for enrollments, you've gone from 39% of our total FTEs from 2013 to almost half. With 300 gone from 324 to 254. So while we've lost, your proportion has increased. The donut, which we talked about, have gone from 136 to 103. So not a significant impact from COVID affected that group of students. They came to the college because there were some programs, there was something specific they were looking for, and they were willing to make the travel to do that. But downstate, you can see this is the group that goes into the residential halls. We've gone from almost a third of the college down to 20%, or you can see 252 students from just that one area down to 102. And these are FTEs, again, not students. So just keep that in mind. So some huge shifts that we've seen And when you look from, and that's before COVID, when you go to COVID, we went from the 102 down to 31 because of
Okay.
COVID. So you can see some pretty significant changes that took place because of COVID. And we got to get those students back, and we got to figure out how do we get them back. And so that's the work there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing this information. And, anytime you guys have a plan, we're always happy to meet with you.
Oh, we know that.
Thank you, Deborah.
You guys are easy to talk to. First of all, Michael is very much involved in all the conversations and contributes on a regular basis. And Jason, he'll jump through hoops to help us if there's an issue that we are foreseeing coming up. So we know that. And the good news is now we think we've got Cortland coming up to the same speed to be responsive and step in. So they're very excited to meet us with you guys also as we go through this plan.
Okay.
Can I ask one quick question at the end here?
Has
Yes,
to be
sir.
really quick.
Well, it is. It's about the consortium. They always have my feet to the fire on behalf of TC3 and late payments. They are doing a new late payment policy right now, which is stricter than it has been in the past.
Yep.
I hate to tell you, they say it's not directed to any organization in particular.
Of course not.
Of course not. But I have always, stood by TC3, and we've championed you. And like you said, Jason and the county have stood by TC3. I just wanted to let you know that they're enacting an even stricter late payment policy. And do you have anything I can take back to them, since they're looking at 3 different committee levels of passing this fairly quickly on what TC3 will be doing as far as paying their bills on time to the consortium?
The quick answer is if the state releases the funds like they said they would, then we should have no issue this year. But the reality is we do need to set up some type of practice that allows the college access to cash, not because it's part of the budget, but because of timing issues. And so we need to come up with some medium to do that, some mechanism that can go in place given a certain notice. We also keep talking about all this capital, and we're talking about grants. Sometimes they're front loaded, which means we're going to need the cash and we're reimbursed to spend it. Well, that's a great example of we need a cash plan. We don't have a cash plan, and I can't go out and borrow money I have to come through you guys to do that. So that's still an open issue since I've been here. We need a way to do that.
We might be able to set something up, Rick, that similar to what we have with soil and water, because they're in the same situation with front-loaded grants. So, I mean, that's something that you might want to explore with Bill.
We have in the past, we're bound by the same loan structuring, whereby they have to pay it back by the end of our fiscal year, which really doesn't help them at all, because that's when their hurt is at the greatest. Their fiscal year is not the same as ours, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've run it by the bond attorneys and our county attorney here innumerable times, and we have pretty strict guidelines as to how we can lend outside to organizations like this. And so that hasn't, even though we've thoroughly gone over that in the past, that hasn't enabled us to make that kind of loan to them, unfortunately, over fiscal year periods, which is the same thing soil and water is faced with.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, guys, but we're just going to have to move on. You've had half of our meeting, Bill Talbot.
Well, thank you very much. I hope it was well worth it.
It was. We appreciate all the work you put into this. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Orinthia.
Bye-bye.
Okay, well, Bill's getting his share screen
Unshared
taken down.
Yeah.
Unshared,
Looking
yeah.
for the unshare. Where's the unshare?
at the top. It should be a red button at the top.
Up. No, stop. You know, let me just see if I can't just log out too.
You can throw a rock at the screen and
Oh, I see it. I'm colorblind, but I found it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.
All right. I suspect that we will not have a presentation from Jason right now because he's probably still in interviews. Henry, do you need to get back to interviews? Do you want to do your WDIC report now? You need to unmute yourself, my friend. Oh, wait, there's Jason. Never mind. Jason's trumps you. Go ahead, Jason.
He's
Hello,
on
everyone.
YouTube, so.
I'm on mute. Sorry about that. We just got off. How's everybody doing today?
Oh, we're fine, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to see you. I had two things I just wanted to show you, and I'm going to try to find it so I can share my screen. One is I wanted to show you kind of an overview of the budget process and kind of share with you the timeline of things and just go through it briefly just to show you the inner workings of the machine, so to speak, and how we've started planning and the document that we use internally. And then also just wanted to make everyone aware, in case you weren't, obviously the federal stimulus bill is most likely to get signed sometime this week or next week by the president, and just starting to get some information from NISAC about parameters around that. I have a meeting on Friday with the administrators in the state and I'm sure Dave Lucas will be there as well, to kind of talk a little bit more about what we know and go from there. So I thought maybe first, if it's all right, I'll share my screen and just share with you a little bit of the planning that we have. We did just have doer interviews with the doer director positions. We had 3 interviews this afternoon. So we just got done with them, and then we have another 2 tomorrow. All right, can everybody see that? 2 timelines?
Yes.
All right. So this is a
Jason,
document.
it's really light and hard to.
And itty bitty printing, and us old people can't see it.
All
Is
right,
there any way to-
how are we doing now? A little better?
Oh, that's a little bit.
Is that better?
That's better.
All right, all right.
I would just urge you in the future to use black type. This is hard.
This document could be like 6 feet long if you printed it, you know, to be able to read.
Right, but
so-
gray type is pretty, but not readable.
So Kevin puts this. We started doing this last year to kind of map out the year. And as you can see, the top one is the capital timeline, and that's more of an internal document or internal timeline. The bottom one is the budget timeline. And we shared this with Rick and Drew the other day as we kind of prepared for the target for the budget or for the capital stuff. But as you can see for the main budget line, you know, this kind of maps out some of the coordination that Kevin does in the months of March. We then do the budget projections really towards the end of March, mid-April for a budget retreat that is right now tentatively, I believe, the 27th.
Yes.
Of April, and just you can kind of just see where we are with things. We then take that, turn that around quickly, and have confirmed with Kathy. We'll put the target resolutions on for the May 4th meeting. Talked to Deborah about that earlier. Make sure you were good with it. And then we talk about publishing the fiscal targets via email to the staff. In between there, we have OTR tracking amendments. So we created a document to do OTR tracking that we also put in the budget document now, so people know where OTRs are, a little bit of a history over the past several years. The legislature's used that document a few times in the budget process. So it's helpful to see what has been approved in the past and where they are. We offer basically some budget system training to new users. Every year there's usually a few new users. So Kevin kind of goes through a tutorial in early May. And then this year we're gonna actually issue the instructions to the department heads at the end of May, which is usually done after Memorial Day, but we're doing it beforehand because Kevin has a vacation during that period of time. So people actually get a few more weeks to enter their budget. Let's just be honest, though. Generally, people do it the last 2 weeks of the time frame, not the first 2 weeks. So, but they have more time to do it if they want to. And then we go through the budget entry process, which they enter the budget in, ending right before the 4th of July. So the budgets are due the 2nd of July, which is right before that long weekend. We have a vacation in there for the week of 4th of July. And then we start our internal budget conversations with departments and agencies, mid-July to the end of July, vacation at the beginning of August. And then we prepare the budget document generally the first week of August into the end of part of August. Now, one of the nice parts about, and then you can see there's several different, when we try to get it to the printer, which is around August 30th, I write my budget message, that following week, do the presentation the following week after it goes to the printer. Because Labor Day is late this year, we would deliver the budget to the legislature on 9/7, which is good versus it being 9/1. So I just thought it was interesting to share this with you. The capital timeline is a little different, so that's a separate process. We basically we get the debt schedules, which Rick has already provided to us, together in the database. We do what they call a capital launch 101 PAR entry. So Kevin will do a refresher course for the primary 5 or 6 departments that have capital projects. The PAR forms are the summary documents you have in the budget document. Well, everyone enters their inputs into an Access database with each one of their projects. So we open that period for the month of April. They then complete it, and we've simplified this last year. We actually pushed back the entry dates later, give them a little intro and a refresher. We simplified the PAR form entry. We then put together, or Kevin basically generates what he calls the BACS. The BACS is what we call the big ass capital spreadsheet. No joke, that's what we label it, because it's a big one. That is what feeds all of those capital documents that you have that you
Is
see.
that big ask or?
Big ass capital spreadsheet. That's
Okay.
document, the BACS. We have a lot of acronyms. This one is PG, so I could say it publicly. But it's the master spreadsheet that feeds through a series of queries, the different ones that you ultimately see in the budget document. And then I go through it, and it has multiple worksheets that feed into it. And then I go through it kind of in draft form, finalize it for the most part, what we call finalizing it. And then what we started doing last year, which worked out well, is Rick, Kevin, myself have a meeting with all of the departments that have requests in for capital projects. And we kind of go through it. It's like a day or two where we just sit down with them. We go through each project. So Rick knows exactly what the funding source is. If there needs to be any borrowing, he can make a note of it so he can start to prepare the borrowing documents needed for borrowing, which usually has to have done by October-ish or September-ish. So this has worked out well because we do it all in one shot, and every department then is there. Rick has the ability to ask them questions, about the project, that may feed the PPU or any details around it, so that he can then go take that information away and deals with the bond counsel to draft whatever bonding or banding documents he needs to do. And then the goal is to be able to finish the BACS, the spreadsheet, before we actually get into the budget conversations. So it's one less thing that we have to do. So the goal here is that it's ready by the 2nd of July. So then we then shift right into the actual budget conversations, absent of the capital projects. And this step here is new. It was new last year, and the feedback I think we got both from Rick and from the other departments is they really appreciated having that kind of sit down to kind of go over funding source expectations, what they were requesting, clarity on what they wanted to do. We were able to simplify and improve the PAR form narratives so that by early July, everything is lined up in draft form. We go through the budget process in mid-July, and then when it comes time to put the budget together mid-August, we have the budget, or we have the capital plan, mostly completed, and all we have to do is the final touches to it as to how it fits into the bigger budget discussion. So that's just kind of the timeline that we follow. As you can see, wheels are in motion now on both the capital program and the main budget itself. So Kevin has already sent out, so for example, if I come down here, Kevin has already sent out here in this time frame to some of the mandated departments, a precursor to starting to think about what we're going to need come April 19th or April 20th when we start to put together the budget retreat numbers. We call it the moving pants. It got the name the moving pants because it was originally called the moving parts, but we couldn't read each other's writing. So I thought it was the moving pants, and that's what stayed with it throughout the process over the past 3 years. There was a picture of it on the whiteboard, and I said, why do we call it the moving pants? And then we've just called it that ever since.
Because it has to accommodate that big ass.
Yeah, it's good. I never put that together before. But so he's already reached out to, so for example, he's reached out to mental health, DSS, the sheriff on some of the mandated costs, little things like that. So he's already started to get their wheels turning on those costs, and then we refine them prior to the budget retreat. So that's what's already started. But I thought it'd be good to show you that. This isn't anything we usually put out publicly. It's just kind of our internal working document. But when you look at it in its entirity, there's a lot of moving parts to it. Or
pants, as the case may be.
Yeah, and so it's just good to see all the work that goes into putting it together, and really starts the beginning of the year. So
That's great, Jason. Does anybody have any questions? I can't see hands.
I would just ask, who keeps track of this and tells you you ought to be here or you ought to be there by today?
So it's a good point. Kevin and Autumn already got together last week, and my calendar spots are already sectioned off for all of the meetings that we do here for the budget timeline. So from mid-July to mid to late August, they're already reserved on my calendar, and she already has, and so that's already reserved. These capital meetings are already reserved in my calendar. So the meeting that we'll do for our prep meeting is already reserved. And then the other ones, I think she still has to finalize, but those are already reserved. So all of the meeting dates, and the way we do it is when we issue the budget instructions to the department heads, we then say, sign up and talk to Autumn, and she's got the ongoing list. So first come, first serve. Although this year we will have a few of them that we're going to do earlier in the year because we know we generally have more than one follow-up. We usually have 2 or 3 follow-ups with them. So for example, weights and measures usually only takes 1 meeting, but something like DSS will take 2 or 3. Recycling might take 2 or 3 just because of its complexity. So we try to put them earlier in the meeting time, which is usually mid-July. And I end up meeting with them probably, 2, at a minimum 2, sometimes 3 times.
Okay, I've got Rich and then Martha.
Yeah, I was just curious about where this timeline came from. Is this a state document or is this Tompkins County created?
This is proprietary to Tompkins County. This came out of last year after Kevin and I sat down, and I said, Kevin, I don't know where's what and what's what. So he created this timeline to really map out milestones as to when certain things have to be done. We also send a document out to department heads, and I think they may have gotten it today, where it kind of maps out the important milestones for them time-wise, so they know the planning process. In fact, I could probably show it to you. Oh, I don't know where it is, but so that's part of a communication that goes out now, so they know, like for example, their draft budgets have to be in no later than July 2nd, and it's going to open up May 21. So they know that. They know that they're going to have to sign up for meeting times with Kevin and I between July 12th and July 30th. They know that, so they have that timeline. They don't have this document, but they have a synthesized timeline for them. I think they got it this week. I think Kevin sent it out today, so they know when things are and what those milestones are. And for capital, they'll know who they are. So no, this isn't a state document. This is what we created. This is based around our budget process.
They don't have pants in Albany.
They don't.
Okay, Martha.
Although they probably have big asses, but this is great. Give Kevin and Autumn our thanks and appreciation. Last year you had a lot of hiccups, a lot of problems with the software.
Yeah.
Or you couldn't produce the OTR reports, and getting printed copies were delayed, and a variety of things. And I know some of that was just the uncertainty of where we were last year, but it sounded like you're going to need to do some radical transformation of software. Is that true, or have things been?
The primary issue with the software is we added a module for two budget entries like we did last year. We asked for 2 different budgets from department heads, and that screwed everything up. To be honest with you, it didn't help. So we're not going to be doing that this year. That said, the budget software is not that great. It's kind of labor intensive because of our budget process and the type of budget we create. It's proprietary to a lot of these functions, are unique to us. So it probably in the near future, sometime in the next year or two, we should evaluate the current system and see if we need to invest in a different one. For now, that's a different, that's a whole other animal to take on, changing budget software. So you kind of got to go at it a little slow. Kevin's frustrated with this software, rightfully so, but we're just not going to be able to change it now. But we should not have, hopefully not the same problem we did before, because at that time there was 2 budget submissions, and some people were confused. The entries went into different ones, so I think that was one of the bigger issues on why we had some hiccups.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. I'll add that to the list of things I'm glad is going to happen after I'm gone. So,
yeah.
Now, last year, of course, we had, an explosion happen in the middle of the year, and a lot of extra stuff happened. This year, we'll get also a similar disruptor, but it should be on the plus side, a major amount of federal money, as we discussed, and we've seen the number. What is I've talked about this with Deborah, like this tiny bit much.
Yeah.
What is, how are we going to manage that?
So I think Deborah and I still have to get together a little bit and talk a little bit about it, as well as Leslin and this group as well, I think. So my initial thoughts is this really should be broken up into several components. And I want to write it out a little bit more and give some more thought to it. But first of all, we have to understand the guidance that's given to it and understand the parameters in which it can be, it can be received in. So that is very vague right now. And we have to wait to see how that develops, and the Treasury will likely put some of those parameters on it. One thing it is, you can use it for is existing expenses and impacts related to COVID. We obviously have some of those expenses that won't be reimbursed through FEMA or any other funding source. So we should identify what we would need to reimburse ourselves for those unreimbursable expenses. That's a small portion. There's another portion that we should look at is there are certain revenues that got hit particularly hard, and that we should probably look at a model of if they were to recover in the next few years, putting variables in place, what would you need to fill those gaps? So for example, I'll take one that we may want to consider. Tourism, right? Tourism lost about 1.8 million out of 3 compared to 2019. If we were to do some rough projections as to that would recover over time, how long would it take you to get to a pre-COVID number? Does the legislature want to use that as kind of a plug over the next several years to be able to get it back to a pre-COVID number so that it can be a transition? Now it's filling a gap. The challenge with that is you can't rely on it in perpetuity, but ultimately it should recover. Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? I don't know, but we should talk about how you would fill that plug over that period of time. Something that's going to come up is HSC and OAR use prior year sales tax as an amount that they'll get. Well, not this coming year, but in 22, they will use the 20 sales tax. That's going to take a big hit, right? So as that begins to recover sales tax, you may want to see how that plug can be filled. So those are types of things we have to identify, I think, because they have to be set aside to see if we want to use that to offset as they move forward. Then the question about, the thing I spoke to Dave Lucas with last week early about it is, and I'm sure it'll come up on Friday in our call, is, this is one-time revenue that should be dedicated to one-time expense. What we shouldn't be doing is balancing our operating budget off of this because it's going to catch up with you when that's no longer there. So how do we focus it? What I've seen preliminarily is water, sewer, and broadband or infrastructure, positions that can be used to target. That's good. I don't know what that means fully yet. We have a robust capital plan. We actually curtailed our capital plan because of the cutback in revenue. So I would envision putting a plug in there to see as sales tax begins to grow, we'll be able to replenish the capital investment as it was pre-COVID. How much of this aid could be used to put that plug together until sales tax revenue recovers? So those are like kind of, that's a very broad overview of it. I would stress the one-time revenue, one-time expense perspective. We have a very aggressive capital plan despite the changes we made towards it. So how do you ensure that you want to keep those investments strong? That's where I'm at right now. What I'd like to be able to do is kind of materialize a little bit more, give some more thought to it, and then probably connect with everybody as to what's the best way to talk about it. It may be at the budget retreat, to be honest with you. That it seems like far away, but it's not. And determining on how long it takes for the Treasury to get guidance out, knowing how that may work, you're going to be 3 weeks away from now. That means we'll be right into the planning for it. So I want to be able to get some initial thoughts out to the legislature in the next week, and then see what information begins to kick up and become available.
And that makes a lot of sense. Important to break it down that way. In terms of capital, would you be thinking of perhaps paying cash rather than borrowing for some things that normally we would pay cash, normally we would borrow for?
I don't know. I mean, one thing, I'll say,
Go ahead, Jay.
I would say one thing to think about is balancing the steady debt investment, right? So, this will go away at some point, but you're still going to have to continue to invest in infrastructure beyond this particular moment in time. You've created a good balance and a good commitment towards your capital planning. I wouldn't want that to go away just because of some one-time revenue. It may mean a little bit more capital investment. It may mean some strategic capital investment, but I think maintaining a steady level of investment in future years is going to be important because that's not going to go away.
Yeah, I was just going to add that there is a normal breakdown between which projects we finance with cash and which ones we finance with bonds or notes. And there's kind of a demarcation between that, in that the traditional bricks and mortar type things that you normally would do bonds, we would still continue in our bond program. That would be like major facilities, roads, bridges, the very large number, the multi-million-dollar projects. The smaller projects, we've been able to turn more towards finance as you go or pay as you go cash projects, such as some emergency operation items where we get grants, some ITS infrastructure, smaller items like that. And so that's one of the purposes for the 3 or 4 day meetings that we have with department heads, Jason and myself and Kevin, is to put those into those two pots. And we kind of have a relative program in our mind on which things should be paid for by cash. So there already is a pretty good list of those projects that are eligible for cash or reserve, not just cash, operating cash, but cash that we have in reserve.
The other thing I would add that we don't know is what's the time frame of use of these funds, which will be, I think, an important thing to understand. And if we were to continue to levy a certain amount of money every year to support the capital plan, even if we were to use this aid to offset it, we can then shift that into building a better reserve for capital projects when you need that later on down the road, right? I mean, there's a way of shifting that around. So, one thing we would want to talk about more is do you completely take out your levy support of it and supplant it with this, which the challenge would be is when this goes away, what do you do then? Or do you find the balance in between? And I think that's, I would go towards the balance in between. And if you can build reserves while using some of this to offset immediate costs, that's a good thing. Keeping that investment for a time when you're going to need it, which is going to happen. Buildings get old, roadways and bridges get old. You got to replace them. Those are the things I would continue to look at.
Right. I would just say that this looks like an infusion of an order of magnitude that we might be able to do something abnormal. That it's not our normal behavior. And I would like us to look at the long term. If you can pay for something and lower your out year debt, I hope we would look at that because this is a one-time opportunity.
Well, I think we will. It's just that we don't really know what's going to be left over once we figure out what the limitations are, what the revenue losses are, what the unreimbursed COVID expenses are. I mean, that 20 million could get whittled down pretty substantially. We just don't know. So I've got a question from Madam Chair and then Mike Lane.
Thank you,
Leslie?
Deborah. It's not a question. It is actually exactly what you just said that I was going to say. And added with Jason saying we don't know the timeline. We know the timeline that we're supposed to get it. I think somewhere within 60 days, but we don't know the timeline of when we're supposed to spend it. And there's still guidance coming from the Treasury. We have general guidance, but there's still guidance coming about what we can and can't spend it on. So that's all I was going to say. Thank you for letting me in.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. Mike?
I just wanted to remind us that there are two other big bills possibly coming through Congress. One is for transportation, and the other is for climate change projects. I mean, they're talking, $4 trillion between these two things. So when we're thinking about what we're going to spend any money we get, any one-time money we get from this current bill, we also should think about, well, what if we get some money from another bill for our roads or for our airport or whatever, or we get some money for our buildings for climate change or any kind of training, let's say, for like we talked about last hour, for the businesses and people who will be involved in green jobs. So we need to keep that in mind as well.
Those are good points, Mike. Thank you. Okay. Is anything else, Jason?
That's all I had. Let's just want to talk about those two topics, and that's it.
That's great. Do you have anything for us, Rick?
Yes, I wanted to review, as I did on Thursday, some of you were here when we talked about this item on public administration. And because I answer to this board, the budget committee, as my whole department does, I wanted to review this item shortly today and also go into a little analysis of the time spent on the outside projects that we take care of. I'm not sure how many of you were at the meeting on Thursday, the GO committee meeting, but some of you were and some of you were not. This is a number of public estates that I handle right now as of the end of the year. You can see there's 9 estates. A lot of them are very old. And for some of you who have not been aware, the treasurer, or in this case, the finance director, is mandated by the state to be the public administrator of estates. That's for people who die that don't have anybody left that can handle the estates.
So these are intestate.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And there's nobody else that will handle the estate, or a judge has said that the beneficiaries aren't capable or they're incapacitated in handling the estate. So they come to my office. Sometimes we're handling 1 or 2 estates at a time. And other times we're handling, like right now, up to 7. Handling 7 estates and there is no other staff person that the county hires, whether it be in the county attorney's office or any other office. I think they used to have somebody, what Jonathan was saying last week, in the county attorney's office that did some of the estate work. But this all falls on the shoulders of Drew and myself. And we really don't have anybody here to help us, so we get bottlenecked from time to time. This one estate I'm working on, we've had to go to court 7 times in the last 9 months, even through COVID, whether Zoom meetings or in person. And the person in question died back in 2010. And I just got awarded the estate to administer, which includes a house to sell and belongings to get rid of and proceeds to distribute. I was just awarded that particular estate last year after the person had already been dead 10 years. So suffice it to say that all the ones that the lucky county administrator or the finance director get to do are very messy, hairy, nasty, unbelievable ones. They're not the simple estate. They are very, very abstract, and you have to go back and put the pieces together slowly. Now, what I'm bringing this to your attention for is, well, two reasons. A, Mike Lane said a couple of years ago, you know, the legislators don't know you do this work at all. And you need to bring it in an open report to them to let us know what you do in handling estates. So that's why I'm bringing it to your attention today. This was the list as of December 31st. There are 4 more that have been added to the list since then. And
Ouch.
out of these 9 plus 4, that's 13, only about half of them are active. What does active mean? Well, some of them, all I have to do is have my name as public administrator so that a bank can foreclose on a mortgage. It's little to no work at all. They just need somebody to serve summons paperwork to. So, and some of these old ones near the top of the list, as you can see, they go back to 2000. They're being held up for one reason or another by Lori Decker and the surrogates court, because I have to work with the surrogates court and the state attorney general and on some of these. A lot of the older ones, they're held up for reasons that don't even involve me. But I'm going to need help at this particular time to administer some estates. And how does that work? Well, a lot of them start with no money at all, no actual cash. When I first came here, I was paying out of pocket once in a while to be able to pay for the filing of deeds and the filing of court fees and all the things that I had to file with the surrogates court, setting up bank accounts and things like that. I was quickly made aware by Jonathan I shouldn't do that. After the first 18 months that I was here, they said, don't be paying these things out of your pocket because there's got to be a different way. Now, in order to do a public estate and have an attorney help me, I have to find somebody who's willing to do the work, but not get paid until the estate is finally closed. You know how long it takes for most of these estates to get closed? I know Mike does because he handles estates. Mike, have you seen estates sometimes go 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
And then some sometimes.
So it's very hard to find a good attorney who will help us handle estates if they know they're going to get $0 until the final distribution is made of the estate. So kind of puts us in a hard spot. We do have the county attorney's office that helps us do the minimal filing of the paperwork, such as when I get awarded letters of administration. They help us go to court dates when it's something simple. But in order to actually start closing out some of these estates and doing the full liquidation of assets, it means sometimes going to the property, cleaning up the property. It means listing a house with real estate agents, selling the house, paying it off all the liabilities, such as taxes, and then distributing whatever proceeds is left to the beneficiaries. It's a big job if you've ever handled an estate personally for a loved one or someone in your family, or if you're an attorney or know an attorney who has done them. It's a really big job. And I just don't think the legislature has really heard of, or we've not made a big deal about it, because I've successfully closed 2 or 3 estates since I've been here. But I wanted you to know that there are at least 4 or 5 right now that are bearing down on us that we have to do something pretty quick in 2021. Drew and I have devoted almost no time to public administration of estates because of other fires we fight and work that we do. Before I move on to the next slide, do you have any questions about this role of public administrator of estates?
Well, it looks like Martha does. Henry, was that a hand raise or a tick?
That's a hand raise.
Okay. All right, Martha and then Henry. And Leslyn, your hand's still up.
Yeah, thanks. This looks like a really difficult and thankless job. Is there any way, if there's any way to cleave off the work from payment of costs up front? I mean, if you could hire somebody to do this work on a, per DM or whatever, per hour basis, and any costs that have to be paid, rather than that they have to front the money. We front the money, but they're doing the labor. I mean, right now we're doing both, and that seems like a killer. Is there any way to hire the help?
Well, the way we've done it in the past was that we got agreements with the couple attorneys that I work with that they would wait until the end for settlement. They're getting harder and harder to find. The question came up last week, do you get commissions on these? Well, the way it's set up here in Tompkins County, nobody here personally gets any commissions. And even the county hasn't gotten commissions traditionally on the closure of an estate. We did have one estate where there were commissions due and payable, and I asked the judge to pay it to Tompkins County, and they did. So now we have about $3,000 in a trust fund that's just set up for the small commissions that we made from the closure of one estate. So that gives us a little bit of seed money, maybe to start another one. And slowly over time, I hope to build that trust fund that can be used for closing other estates. So that's just an idea that I had. Once again, there's treasurers all across New York State, and the way that their jobs are set up, it's different than here. They're elected. Their whole charter is different, and they actually personally get to keep the commissions in addition to their salary. We don't do that here in Tompkins County. We just do this.
Okay, I'm just trying to suggest a way to make the labor, move the labor out of your department. All right, thank you.
Yeah. And this next slide here is.
Well,
Wait, Henry has his hand up.
Okay.
Why isn't the AG's office handling this?
The district, the
attorney general.
No, the Attorney General's office.
Well, because state law provides that when there isn't somebody, it has to be the finance, the CFO or the treasurer of the county. That's right in the state law.
So this is another unfunded mandate.
Very much.
And you keep saying that. Okay, go ahead.
And normally when times are good and I can fit it in, we work on estates when we have a little bit of breathing room and can do it on weekends or nights. Right now I have Drew that's helping me. He's learning how to do this. He goes to court with me whenever we have a case, like we have one this Thursday, and we'll be going to court. But it really requires a lot more hours than what he and I can put into it. And that's why I'm not bringing an action item before you right now, but I just wanted to plant a little bit of a seed in front of you to say that you'll probably hear me coming back saying, I need help again. And this time I have an attorney who will help us. Can I spend this money to get started on this estate? And I don't want you to be surprised or having not ever heard of it before. So this was just a 101 introduction for you all today to understand that we do this extra job on the side along with everything else that we do.
So if we hired an attorney, even if we had to pay them up front, when the estate is settled, we would recover those fees, right?
Yes. Any expenses that are incurred, tax accountants, attorney costs, they're paid up for, they come off the top.
Assuming there's anything to come off the top of.
Assuming there's anything to come off the top of, correct. Jonathan said years ago, it's probably many years ago, there actually was an attorney who worked in the county offices here with Jonathan that actually did some estate work. But that we don't have that person anymore, and we don't have anybody else in our county's structure, not in social services or not in the county attorney's office, that's able and willing to jump in and do this work. So of course it falls on us, and we have to do it by law because the judge issues letters of administration to me personally, and I have to conduct business then at that point.
Okay, Leslyn, did you have something?
I had another question.
Oh, sorry, Henry.
Yeah,
I can't.
You keep saying Tompkins County doesn't take commissions. Do other counties take commissions?
We just started to take commissions, Henry, because I went to a judge and asked them to please award any commissions to Tompkins County because they always normally award commissions to the treasurer. But because I was preempted from doing it here, because Tompkins County didn't want the treasurer here to get the commissions went to nobody. So in one case, I successfully had the judge have the commissions paid to Tompkins County. And those are the monies that we put in a trust account in the T fund. But everywhere else in the state, the treasurer and or the county gets commissions.
So the treasurer would get it personally?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
And
Leslin.
I'm not pushing for that. I would just like the county.
No.
I would just like the county to get it at this point. And we have started to do that.
Okay. Leslin, and then I've got to move this along because we've got like, 17 minutes left and half of our agenda.
Thanks, Deborah. Henry, I believe those are counties where the treasurer is elected, if I heard Rick right.
Right.
Rick, you know what, I'm not going to take up your time, Deborah. I'm probably just going to circle back with you because now I'm relatively confused when you say this is something that you have to do. It's mandated. It's in state law. I wasn't sure I heard an answer to Martha's question, if it has to be you or if we can hire somebody to do it. So I'll just circle back. I don't need you to do it right now, given the agenda, and get some clarification. Thank you.
The quick answer on that is it has to be me, but I can hire somebody to do it. So if there was a staff person here that was hired to do just this, that would be fine. We could have a staff attorney here working on it, but the treasurer always has to be the named person in court. But yes, I am allowed to use either staff people to help me or outside attorneys to help me.
Okay, Martha, I see your hand, but there's no action item. Can we just?
Yeah, I'm putting my hand down I'll circle back because it's confusing me right now.
I have one other slide here that I think benefits how much time we estimate would go into public administration of states. We estimate that to be about 9% of my time should be afforded, like in this year, in order to get the estates cleaned up this year. The other areas that I work for that I called additional duties of the Director of Finance, a lot of you may not be aware of this too, so I thought I would lay this before you. Greater Tompkins County Municipal Health Insurance Consortium, about 15% of my time is spent doing the books of the consortium. That's the health insurance consortium. And yes, we do get paid for that, but that's an allotment of my time, Jessica's time, and Drew's time, which is about 15%. These other three organizations at the bottom, Tompkins Task, the Tobacco Asset Securitization Corp, the IDA, and the TCDC, or Development Corp, those three groups together take about 10% of my time because I do all the accounting, check writing, receipts and disbursements for those organizations. So when you add it all up, 34%, roughly 1/3 of my time is spent extracurricular activities outside of county main operations. And I thought you should be aware of that.
Yeah, Rick, if you would please share these documents, just send a copy to the members of the committee.
Certainly will.
Thank you. Okay, well, this is interesting to know. It sure as hell sounds like we ought to be collecting commissions from these estates for the county. Okay.
That's all I have, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Okay, Henry, and then we need to hear from Laura if she has anything on Ruby's behalf.
Yes, the WSC met the end of February. We had Ken Clark come talk about the Office of Human Rights. He said that complaints are down, but again, with COVID, you would expect them to be. We also had Deanna Crisis talked about the JEDI team. and then moving forward and everything else, since they got their values passed. And also Jason had a presentation on reimagining public safety. And so that went longer than expected, but then it was a good conversation. But then I didn't get my goals done, but we're gonna get the goals done by email because we don't meet, we meet every other month. And so we'll meet in April.
Thanks, Henry. Does anybody have any questions for Henry? Okay. Sorry to have kept you waiting through all this, Henry, but I'm
Nope.
sure you just loved learning about all this stuff.
I did learning about mix.
Okay. All right, thank you. Laura, is there anything from HR?
Yes, Ruby wanted me to extend an invitation to anyone from the committee, legislators that would like to participate with the doer the staff meet and greets.
I couldn't hear that.
No, sorry. Ruby wanted me to extend an invitation for people that any of the legislators that would like to participate with the doers interviews. It's the meet and greet with staff as well. So if you're interested, please let me know and I can convey that to Ruby, or you can let Ruby know too.
Thanks, Laura. I also had an email exchange with Ruby, and I just wanted to fill you all in on that. Apparently, when she sent this email, she said that they had a meeting scheduled for March 4th to review the direct report process and develop recommendations for a more efficient and effective method of obtaining realistic, measurable results, actionable results from the process. So I won't belabor that at this point. We'll just look forward to hearing that next month. I do want to see those surveys sent out in April, please, so that we can get this done by September before we start the budget. And of course, you probably all know that the CSO position is going to be posted this Thursday. I talked to Katie and Megan this morning, and they said that they think they've got about 8 applications for the 2 senior planner positions in DPS, and they are hopeful that they will get a good result from this latest posting. They expect some more applications before the end of the period, which I think is March 17th. Martha.
And how long will the CSO position be posted, and can we get the flyer so we can share it around? The application period for CSO.
It'll be 30 days. We'll send it out to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. So resolutions. We've got appropriation from contingent fund, virtual conference suite technology systems from the sheriff's office, ID 9898. Would somebody move that, please? Martha moves and Mike seconds. Discussion. Martha.
I'm looking at the memo. What I understand, if this is a way to allow visitors to actually talk to and see their family members who are incarcerated, I hope we won't keep doing this with visitors after the pandemic is not an issue. I would hate to see this sort of take the place of in-person visits.
No, I believe this is more for arraignments. And,
Well, that's what
yeah, I mean, it's more intended for arraignments and if there need to be arraignments in the middle of the night, they can be done. This essentially is a centralized arraignment access, and it's allowed to be done virtually, and I would imagine it'll probably continue to be done virtually. So this allows it to be one of the benefits. It allows it to happen more frequently and easier.
Sure.
Yeah.
The memo, though, says additionally, inmate visitations and programs have been physically limited due to the pandemic. These requirements and limitations will continue into this 2021 fiscal year and the years to follow.
I know I talked to Derek about this at Public Safety, and he said no, that they're not gonna get rid of in-person visits. Although I may not say that, but he said that they would not.
Okay. Great. I mean, trainings and whatever, that's different programs. If those remain as a virtual option, that might actually enrich what we can offer. But I wouldn't want to see visitations happen that way. Unless maybe if it allows people who are out of town, let's say, have that as an option, that would be interesting, but I wouldn't want that to be the default. Thanks.
Rich?
I was just going to say that it certainly would be a supplement that would allow more visitation overall rather than less. So I think this is a good thing, but its chief use is for the arraignments.
Okay, anything else? We ready to vote? Rich?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that's unanimous, 4-0. Okay, next resolution, adjustment to the 2021 budget, city-county sales tax distribution agreement, ID 9972. Can I get a motion on that? Martha moves. Rich seconds. Any discussion? There are any questions about this? We have Rick to explain it. Okay, yeah, Martha.
So this is a cut that's passed through to, it's mostly human service agencies, right?
Yes, mostly. And this is part of that city sales tax agreement that goes way back to 1993. And Kevin plugs all the numbers in based on the prior year proceeds. And that's why it's a reduction this year to those programs and to the city of Ithaca to the tune of 15.75%. That's why you see a reduction instead of an increase this year.
Right, usually it's an increase. So, but in other words, just to confirm, we don't have to make them whole. This is just, this money just doesn't go. Okay, thank you.
So this
Yeah.
money, I don't understand. If we're paying the city less, then the city should figure out who it's going to cut. Am I missing
It's just a
something?
pass through, Deborah, and it's a correction from what was originally anticipated.
Oh, okay.
It's
The
a separate
agreement-
decision.
And the agreement specifies certain not-for-profits the city has to contribute to.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Mike.
It's in the mix with the whole Human Service Coalition funding scheme.
And it's always 1 year late. It's always based on the previous year's numbers. So last year when we were all going through COVID pains, they were unaffected because it was based on the prior year, which was a great year. This year they're getting dinged or they're feeling the hurt because it was based on 2020, which was a very bad year.
So they're going to come begging to us in the budget process, is that? Never mind. Okay, Rich, did you have a question or did you just forget your hand was up?
Sorry about that. I don't know how it went up. I must have inadvertently done it.
Okay, great. Are we
Sorry.
ready to vote? Okay, Rich,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Martha,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so that's unanimous. Can I get a motion on the minutes, subject to the correction that I sent by email to Michelle and all of you?
Sure.
Oh, Mike moves. Martha seconds. Any comments? Martha?
I have a question on packet page 8. There's the issue about the COPS funding. And Jason, you'd said to us that 11 counties receive funding through COPS. And if it's possible to get the names of those 11 so we could, if we're going to put something together to try to push at the state level.
I think I sent it out with the Tiger material with the presentation.
Oh,
I can dig it
I
up
know you
again.
sent I know you sent the dollar amount. I didn't remember seeing the other counties, but I can look at
It's a PDF with all the counties on it. If you don't have it, I can send it again. But yeah,
Okay.
and it was the last year's allotment.
Okay. All right, I'll check there. Thanks.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Rich?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Mike?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So, despite the fact that we were so far behind, it's now 4:57. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
What about other things you want to talk about?
We can save those for next time. We do need to have another discussion about our goals, but this just wasn't the month to do it because Ruby wasn't here and I didn't know if Jason was going to be here. So we'll save that excitement for next month. All in favor of adjournment? Okay, that looks unanimous. Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Jason, for arranging that presentation by TC3. It was very informative.
I'm sorry I missed it. I'll catch up with you later about it.
It was a good one.
Good,
Okay.
okay.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Brittany.
you.
Thanks, Michelle.